This is Matthew Crider, and I'd like to talk about the 10 most gruesome estate planning mistakes. Mistake number 6 is not funding your assets into the trust. Now, funding means that you change ownership of the assets into the trust that should be owned by the trust. So in other words, the assets or the property that you own will be owned by the trust. Now, we talked about how a trust is like a bucket, that you create the bucket in a prior video. Another way to look at a trust is like a safe. And when you think about the qualities of a safe is heavy, it is fireproof, it locks, and it raises the question of how useful is the safe if you don't put the important documents or the important property into the safe and close the door and lock it. How effective is that safe going to be? Well, it's not going to be that effective. In the same way, a trust is only effective if you transfer assets into the trust, meaning if you change the ownership of your assets so that they're owned by the trust as opposed to owned by you as an individual. I've seen a lot of people who usually what happens is the successor trustee comes into my office, they have a really nice estate planning binder, and I review the binder, review the trust, I understand how the trusts work, and then I ask the person, okay, great, I know how the trust works, show me the assets that are owned by the trust. And usually the person at that point, they stare at me blankly and they say, well, what do you mean? And so then I have a conversation with them about how to make the trust work, the assets have to be transferred into the trust. At this point, normally there's a look of fear over the potential client's face, and once we start digging, we find out that the trust maker, the person who has set up the trust, has not transferred ownership of the assets into the trust. And at that point, unless they've taken certain steps in the trust document itself, more likely than not, the trust itself will not have any value. It will not do what the person wanted it to do, namely avoid probate and transfer assets efficiently without having to go to court. So the trust will only work the way you want it to work if you change ownership of the assets so that they're owned by the trust and not you individually. This is Matthew Crider talking about the 10 most gruesome estate planning mistakes. If you'd like to learn more about the 10 most gruesome estate planning mistakes, I invite you to click the link below or visit our websites. There you can learn about estate planning, wills, trusts, probate, elder law, Medi-Cal planning, and VA planning. This is Matthew Crider, and thank you for watching.